Netherlands, and here's lack of dedicated bicycle facilities here. Above a certain speed of a road with a lot of traffic, a lot of people just don't feel safe cycling. So I think when we're considering bicycle lanes on Hamilton Avenue, you don't just consider the existing cyclists in Princeton today, which I'm one, and I know that there are a number of them, but the potential cyclists that would come with dedicated facilities. It starts with Hamilton, hopefully it goes elsewhere, but it's about granting respect to the cyclists and also not just making them feel safe, but actually having a safe and dedicated facility for cyclists in Princeton. I think it's really within the spirit of the Complete Streets policy in Princeton to look at this and to look at the priorities that you're setting for each street. I think this is the right priority for Hamilton Avenue. I hope you vote for it. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Before Matt goes, I was just going to say, everybody who's standing up in front of the mic right now, we want to hear from you, but then I think I'm just going to close off so council gets a chance to vote tonight. And if it does pass tonight, we will be holding a public hearing. So if there's people who aren't standing up who would still like to speak, we'll hear you if we're still talking about this when it comes to the public hearing. Let's go ahead.
All right, Matt Wasserman. I'll be wearing my Environmental Commission hat for the next 30 seconds. As you know, in terms of our master plan, there's a lot in there, priorities in terms of transportation and sustainability. And as you know, when we look at applications throughout Princeton, time and time again, you'll see us with a recommendation that that the applicant add more bike parking, more bike racks. It would seem somewhat hypocritical for us not then to also introduce and to begin the discussion on providing paths to actually use those bikes, once they've take them out of those bike racks. So I just, what I'd like to say is the precedent that we would set as it relates to the master plan, as it relates to the future of Princeton, to not actually then begin the discussion at the next meeting after you've introduced this. It would be, you almost couldn't get past it at that point. You might as well just take all of it off the table in terms of sustainability and transportation as it relates to these types of as it relates to this topic. So I just urge you to pass the introduction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Wendy Nager. I live at 459 Cherry Hill Road. I've lived at that address, which is up at the top of Cherry Hill, for 34 years, and at no time during that period have I been able to propel a bike up Cherry Hill to my house. So I can't speak from the perspective of somebody who bikes a lot, but I can speak from the perspective of somebody who has gotten along without on-street parking for 34 years, and I can say that, it can easily be done. Are there occasions when it might have been, convenient to have it? Yes, but it's not essential, and I think we have to remember that roads are not created to give on-street parking to the adjacent houses, but to help people get from point A to point B safely. And I understand that Mr. Simon got a majority negative response, but I think you have to remember that in polling, a lot depends on how the question is asked. And if people were asked, would you be willing to make some sacrifice so that you could prevent serious injury or death to your fellow community members who rely on bicycles, they might think harder about their answer to the question. So I support the ordinance. I hope it passes. Thanks.
Thank you.
Dan Rappaport, 300 Bun Drive. I guess you've had a chance to look thoroughly through Ralph Widner's report about a database for Princeton, and it said that there were 27% of the people who live in Princeton who commuted to work by walking or bicycling. I thought it was actually a greater percentage. And so that shows you that there's a strong number of people who could benefit from a bicycle lane on Hamilton Avenue, and later on, more bicycle lanes. And then, in addition to that, there's this very humorous book called Bicycle Tribes that shows you all the different kinds of people who use a bicycle to go any place. And I'm sure Princeton is a microcosm of everything that was described in the book, because we see people using their bicycles for all kinds of things, from the Century Road Club to the people who are riding on the sidewalk. And those are the people, in particular, the people who are riding on the sidewalk, that we want to make improvements for bicycling, because technically it's a no-no to ride a bike on a sidewalk. And then there was another publication a long time ago, Vehicle for a Small Planet, that talked about how a majority of people's trips are 5 miles or less. So if they're living in Princeton, most of Princeton's population lives within a 5-mile radius of downtown. So I think these are all important things to take into account. And lastly, something that isn't very widely known, Princeton and Princeton University have received bronze level status for being a bicycle-friendly community and a bicycle-friendly university by the League of American Bicyclists. Is this as far as we can go? Like the song says, is that all there is? I sure hope not.
Thank you.
Good evening, Paul Shore, 299 Hamilton Avenue. I may be the only one who lives on Hamilton Avenue who's speaking tonight. We've raised 3 children. They went to Littlebrook, the middle school and the high school. They bicycled, they walked. To get to the high school or the Littlebrook or to the middle school, they didn't use Hamilton Avenue. They went up either Harriet, or not Harriet, but the other streets that are side streets. It's too dangerous to bicycle on Hamilton Avenue. There's a curve at a very difficult point right near Harriet, and the road also narrows at that location. And I'm sure that I know that Deanna and Bob have done an excellent job in designing and redesigning the rights of way, and but there are limitations on how much you can, as we heard tonight, how much you can take away the sidewalks or the streets because of the utility poles. And whatever has to be done should be done, but let's not mislead ourselves. Hamilton Avenue is very heavily traveled. There's no speed control that is obeyed. And the bicyclists, by the way, I also run in the morning, just about every other morning, and also watch the kids go to school to Littlebrook, and most of the parents put them on the sidewalk because it's a little too dangerous to walk or bicycle on the street. And in terms of cars that park on the street, well, you have to be careful about parking on the street too, because you can get hit. We've had a car or several cars, and our neighbor's car has been hit at that corner because of the visibility that's decreased and because of the curvature of the road. So safety is a big concern. We're not trying to be against bicycling, but we also have bicycles. I also bicycle and run and walk. And none of those things are prevented by using the sidewalk. We don't have a huge shopping center on either end of Snowden or Harrison, so there's no real great traffic, pedestrian or bicycling traffic that goes from one to the other, but there is a heck of a lot of car traffic that goes from one to the other. So I would hope that you take that into consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, now I'd like to bring the conversation back to council. I don't know if there's anything, first of all, I want to thank everybody who came out tonight. It's great to have so many people come and express their opinions, so I appreciate everybody who came out. But I do want to turn to council and see if there's any further discussion. Yeah, Ms. Howard?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree. It's been great to have so many people here, and I want to thank Deanna and the Ped Bike Committee and Traffic and Transportation for what clearly has been a really thorough review of this issue. And I appreciated, Sam, that you walked us through how the process has allowed you to recognize the nuances in the different situations, and really value the expertise and advocacy of everybody in the room and those expert committees. I just want to say I support this ordinance because I think Complete Streets is a terrific policy and principle, and the question for us is, are we going to make that policy a reality? Adoption of the policy is meaningless if we don't follow through when we have opportunities, as we do here. As someone said, we're going to get these opportunities. They're going to come up when road work comes, and we need to seize those opportunities. We know that bike lanes are proven to improve safety and encourage biking. And it seems like Hamilton is a particularly important opportunity because it's a key artery from a circulation perspective near schools and shopping. So I will support it because I think this is an opportunity before us, and we really do need to seize them when we can to make Complete Streets a reality. Thank you.
Mr. Lindman?
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody for coming. This has come up in the past. We have to make a decision in regard to what's the overall good over something that you're voting for based on the town. And I asked myself, if I was in the shoes of the Hamilton residents, would I want them to take away my parking and put a bicycle dedicated lane in front of my house? And that's what you really have to do for everyone here. And I'm not trying to throw this out there just to throw it out there, but ask your own selves, where you live, is that something you would like to do? And I think that Wendy hit it on the head when she said, if it would be the benefit of other people, if it would be you'll lessen an accident that could occur, or you can lessen something that major could occur if you didn't have a bike lane there. So I think when you look at it that way, before I say the direction I would like to go, there is a handicap vehicle I always see on Hamilton Avenue, and a lady deals with her family and so forth. If we do have a bike lane, and Officer Murray's here, maybe can answer to this, is there some way, I know it seems kind of strange, but if that's something, the only way that they're in and out of that house, is that something that we can look at down the road? I'm just saying if this is something that I'm just asking.
Just to kind of clarify or add to what Councilwoman's asking, there is a couple that lives on the corner of Harriet Drive and Hamilton that are in their 80s, and both of them walk at the pace that you'd expect of people that age, and the husband specifically walks very, very slowly. They do have a driveway. However, frankly, the driveway is on Harriet Drive and is inaccessible to the husband from the house because of stairs and because of the slope of the street. So the challenge for that couple is that right now when they travel by car, the wife gets into the car in the driveway, drives around the block, pulls up in front of the house, and the husband gets in and the husband gets out. And it's an exercise for them. They're at that stage of life where it's a challenge. I was walking my dogs just a few weeks ago when I saw the husband fall. And with 3 dogs and being several houses down, I was not exactly the fastest responder. There were other people who were driving by and neighbors who saw this, who came out and helped the husband get up. But if we take away the right of those people to use that spot for that purpose, it will be a significant impediment toward them being able to age in place. And the challenge is actually, I saw that there is an exception that we're modifying the parking ordinance but not the standing portion of the ordinance. I don't know the legal definition of standing, but I would suggest that their use of that space leaks over into the legal definition of parking. and it would be a significant hardship, especially for that family.
Yeah, I was just throwing that out there as the only detriment for me. But I do support a bicycle lane. I really do. I think I have 3 children. I ride. I even run Hamilton Avenue. Burning season on Saturday mornings in the summer more in the winter. But I do think it's kind of dangerous. But I also don't want us to buy into any kind of notion that having a white lane on any street and a kid on a bicycle means that cars go over the white lane into that lane also. We have to be mindful, no matter where we drive in Princeton, in regard to anyone on a bicycle, wherever they are. So I want to be mindful. But I am in support with the question that I raised that we can talk about.
Can we get
Ms. Connor?
Stopping and standing is allowed on the bike lane within the car, correct?
That is not part of the ordinance, so that's not prohibited at this point.
It's not prohibited.
Parking,
Right,
correct.
there's a separate borough ordinance for standing versus parking, and we're not amending the standing ordinance, just the parking ordinance.
Correct.
So, correct me
Right.
if-
And I believe standing means you're in the car, so they would be
They're
allowed.
certainly not meeting that definition, because the husband needs assistance.
Oh, you mean so they're getting out of
it
the
takes-
car?
Yes, and it takes them a while. So under any definition that most of us would think of for standing, they're not going to meet it.
But wouldn't there be discretion in terms of application of that ordinance? I think I'm looking at Sergeant Murray. I can't imagine giving a ticket for standing in that situation, but can you comment?
I would say yes, absolutely, on the discretion aspect. And we all knew entering into this that it was going to be a challenge and that we weren't going to be able to please everyone because there's differences of opinion, there's differences of need. We could talk all night about this. I think we all know what they are. You heard earlier that the Traffic and Transportation Committee unanimously supported it. I'm a member of that committee. We're going to have to identify the needs of this particular individual. I would venture to say that we'll reach out to them probably before the week is out, research this and look into it and see what we can do for them. Perhaps there's plenty of room for improvement. In fact, probably we might be able to make the situation a little better than the one that currently exists, if possible. But yes, by all means, there would be discretion. I don't want to see our work to this point be stalled because of something like this. I don't think it has to be. And to answer the question that was posed earlier about, what can we do to accommodate the handicap needs? Well, we certainly have the ability to clearly establish the need, get it on record, and bring it before council. I believe that every one of the council members present here tonight have been a part of that when we last did that on Jefferson Street for a handicapped resident. And I think that's a great example of how we quickly got all the information together. We brought it before public vote. Everybody was in support of it. Work with DPW, get the signs up. And when that particular space was needed, it was there and accommodated. And unfortunately, when the need passed, we rescinded the ordinance and pulled up the signs. So, yes, there's room for discretion and there's room for improvement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Simon and then Ms. Krummeller.
Okay, I have several comments on this ordinance. I guess the statement that the parking on that street is lightly utilized is, I suppose it's in the eye of the beholder. For the people I spoke with, they didn't consider it either lightly utilized or optional in the main. They considered it critical to how their household functions and the needs of their household. There are, as everyone in this room knows the pulse of their own neighborhood, or does if you think about it and reflect on it a little bit. And the pulse of this neighborhood can be reflected in the parking, and it's highly variable. There are certainly times of day, there is no overnight parking allowed. So there are certainly times of day, especially early and late, where you will find 0 cars on the road. During the day, the number of cars is highly variable. Several times a year, there are, as you would expect in any neighborhood, there are the family events, whether in celebration or mourning, where the street essentially fills up. Also, something which may not be as obvious, but several times a year, there are particularly large events at the Jewish Center. And my street, Harriet, fills up completely, and parking sprouts out from there on Hamilton, as well as up Levitt. And so, in fact, if we take away parking on Hamilton, we are taking away some of the overflow parking for the Jewish Center on Nassau Street. One of the sort of challenges in sort of understanding where we're at is that we are weighing several different priorities, and it's fairly difficult. One of the priorities is complete streets, and being true to the commitment of complete streets, which is to encourage pedestrian, bicycling, and transit uses. That's absolutely true, and it's absolutely a commitment of the town. And with respect to that specific commitment, there's one thing I would like to interject. I didn't fully capture some of the comments. The single most frequent comment I heard from people was, is there any way you can do both? Is there any way you can possibly preserve our parking and encourage and still somehow improve the biking? Now, the cost estimates we've seen in terms of widening the road are prohibitive, and I don't think that any of us would be prepared to advocate in that direction. But in terms of the single most common comment I received out of that neighborhood, that was it. So people are very supportive of biking and pedestrian uses. And the read I get both within this neighborhood and within the larger community is that the challenge we will have is when those uses are in conflict with each other. This is, in fact, a precedent for the town where we would take away parking in favor of bicycling. And it's a challenging precedent to implement for several reasons. One is we do not have a plan that says that this is what we're going to do. There is a circulation element that was just passed in November of 2013, a circulation element of the master plan. The Bike Ped Committee and the Transportation and Traffic Committee was consulted on that plan, and the bike plan there does not show bicycle paths on that stretch of Hamilton. So the process, the planning process that the town has gone through and that people should expect based on that does not provide an indication that there is going to be a dedication of bike lanes in that section. There is a map which explicitly does not show that.
I just want to speak to that. So that map was put together because the master plan subcommittee was working on the circulation element. And if you look at that map, mostly it's existing paths on there. So that map was meant to capture existing paths and ones that were sort of in the pipeline of about to be built.
And I understand.
So it wasn't intended to be the bike master plan in the way that, and I see Marvin nodding his head out there, it wasn't intended to be the bike master plan in the same way we have the sidewalk master plan. And in fact, that document, the bike master plan, is something that's on I hope that will be on our priorities list. It was one of the things we talked about at our last meeting to do for this year.
I completely agree with that. The challenge we've got right now is we don't have that master plan. We have a proposal from 2002, a community bike plan, which was never developed into a plan. Let me find that, because in it, it said that heavily traveled streets could be made compatible through the prohibition of on-street parking. And it listed Hamilton, Wiggins, Mercer, Alexander, Harrison, and Witherspoon. So Councilman Liverman, if this goes through, you may actually be facing that exact choice downstream by your own home.
Yeah, and that's why, and I'm glad you said that, because one question that I asked earlier was if you're willing to do this in front of your home, and my answer is yes. So that's why I'm glad that's a question that you really have to ask yourselves. Everyone, whenever you take someone's parking away, make sure you can do it for your own home. And my answer is yes, publicly.
I was asked by one member of the neighborhood to read a short statement. It's very short, so I'm going to just include it right here. Please share my opinion that a bike lane that removes street parking in front of the house would impose hardship on my family, especially given limited on-property parking, elderly grandparents, and a thriving business run out of the home. So I will also tell you the most interesting single comment I got.
I didn't catch that last sentence about
the removal of street parking in front of the house would impose hardship on my family, especially given limited on-property parking, elderly grandparents, and a thriving business run out of the home.
A thriving business run out of the home?
Mm-hmm. So
Is this TMI we're dealing with?
I did not name the individual, and I will advise the individual based on the feedback we're getting here that they should omit that from their comments.
I think they should omit it.
Look, the trade-off here is a very difficult one, and it's quite vexing. And we're hampered by actually several sort of missing components of the planning process. One is having the bike master plan completed to the satisfaction of both the bike ped committee and the planning board. We don't have that right now. I actually don't fully understand why, because it's been worked on since 2002 and it was updated in 2012, but somehow it did not make it into the November 2013 circulation element. In terms of realizing the goal of improving bicycling routes in Princeton, it's proven difficult precisely because of the space constraints and the competing uses of roads and paths. And in this section of town, it's really no exception. The trade-offs can be vexing for us as policymakers. The municipality has made a commitment to improve the road and path infrastructure in town to support bicycling. At the same time, the installation of bike lanes to the exclusion of on-street parking on Hamilton Avenue between Harrison and Snowden will negatively impact the residents who live there and many people who visit that section of town as well. Decisions by the governing body, even on high-impact issues such as this one, are almost always made with incomplete information because it's generally very difficult for council to hear from a broad cross-section of the community. The conversation tonight is made further challenging by the fact that the council is being presented with a single segment project and not a complete plan for the community. I also got interrupted in mid-thought with respect to the most interesting comment I received, and that was somebody who asked if they could possibly add parking. They actually do not have parking in front of their home, and they'd like 2 more spots of parking added on Hamilton Avenue.
Ms. Connell?
Well, I just wanted to say that I support this ordinance. I don't think I can say anything new for all the reasons that the other supporters have said already. I do acknowledge that the residents, that this is going to be, an inconvenience for the residents, but I think it's going to be an inconvenience. It's not going to be, they will still be able to park. They'll still be able to have visitors. They're just going to have to walk a little bit farther to park. So it's hard to make, it's hard in these situations sometimes when you have to balance the needs of the different needs. And in this case, I think we're deciding that our commitment to bike paths is strong enough that the pros outweigh the cons.
Okay.
Mayor?
Yeah, Ms. Butler?
Great, thank you. Patrick is right. These decisions are always present conflicts and trade-offs. But when I was the liaison to Traffic and Transportation, this came before us, and I felt strongly then, and I will support now, this proposal to create bike lanes. As with the sidewalks on Poe Road, we won't revisit this again anytime soon, and I don't see the traffic in Princeton diminishing, and I do think that there's increasing interest in being able to ride bicycles safely. It's something we've wanted to encourage. I really hope I communicated a little bit with Deanna Stockton about also Mount Lucas. When do you know when that will be coming before us in this same ordinance form?
Mountain Lucas, we're in final design at this point. We're looking to, we're seeking approval from NJDOT, who's providing some grant funds to allow us to go out to bid. So any changes on the parking ordinance, I would think, would come in the next couple of months.
Well, I hope you've heard we have a lot of support here. I drive up and down Mount Lucas every day. I know that's not under discussion. It was coming into this discussion, I wondered whether we had a critical mass of bicyclists on Hamilton to warrant the sacrifice and the trade-off we would be making. Where I feel strongly that we have a critical mass is on Mount Lucas, because I drive there every day and I see lots of bicyclists every day. And so I hope you'll take what we've heard tonight as in this discussion and the support for bicycle lanes. When we think about the Mount Lucas, it looks to me like we've got people going back and forth and sometimes on the sidewalks, and look again at whether we can support bicycle lanes on that street. But I definitely think that we have to start somewhere, and we won't have the critical mass of cyclists if we don't create safe roadways. And so, while I'm not convinced that this is the very best stretch of road, we won't be back for 20 years at least, and we have an opportunity to build cycling, and I think we need to seize the day.
Mr. Miller?
I'd just like to start with the premise that if somebody comes to me with a question and says, how would you feel about my taking away from you something that you consider to be a privilege or a right? How would you respond to that? And most people are going to respond in a rather negative manner to it. I don't think that we created roads to create parking. We created roads to move people safely and to move goods safely. We, as a community, are trying to encourage both walking and biking. I think this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to do it on roughly a third of a mile stretch of a major road in our community, and I think it is an opportunity we should not miss. We should do it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Howard? Okay.
We have a motion?
We have a motion and a second, so I'd like to call a vote. All in favor of introducing this ordinance? Aye.
It's a roll call.
Oh, right, we do need to do a roll call. Thank you. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
And Mr. Simon?
No.
Mr. Simon votes no, but motion carries.
Okay, so the ordinance is introduced by a vote of 5-1, and the public hearing for this ordinance will be on January 26th. Does that give us enough time for the notification? Okay.
I'm going to be absent on that. I have to travel for business, and someone made some reference to, Mark, is somebody else not going to be here that night? Or I'm the only one? Okay, so you're holding the goals. Thank you, but you won't need to hold this. It doesn't affect.
Okay. Okay, so the public hearing will be on January 26th, so if you're interested in coming back, I encourage you, everybody who came out tonight, and if you want to hear about the great bike project on Prospect Avenue, you can stay too, because that's going to come up in just a few minutes. Maybe we're losing everybody. All right, thank you very much. And I want to thank council too for that vote. Let's go back and finish the other ordinance introductions, and then, well, actually, since Deanna, do you want to do the presentation now, or? Okay. Okay, all right, why don't we finish the ordinance introductions, and then we'll come back and finish the presentation. So the first ordinance is an ordinance by Princeton authorizing the acceptance of a deed of conservation easement for Block 2802, Lot 1.01, Princeton Tax Map. And this is for a conservation easement from the Goldman Sachs property on Mount Lucas Road. I believe it's a housekeeping ordinance, something that was part of a planning board decision several years ago. So I don't know if there are any questions on this one, or if there's a motion to introduce.
I'll move. Oh.
Yes,
Well,
Ms. Butler?
I'll second it, but I also have a question.
Okay, so it's moved by Ms. Krummeller and seconded by Ms. Butler, and then Ms. Butler, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Well, I was just looking at Ed's memo. Carol Calhoun, is that, she hasn't worked here for a long time, the person who he supposedly talked to about our insurance. We need a $5 million policy on that piece. Did I read that correctly? See if
Yeah, he does say that he spoke to Carol Calhoun. I don't see specifically the reference to $5 million.
I can give a little bit of history. I believe this dates back to 1999 in a planning board decision, and for whatever reason, the easement hadn't been fully put on paper. And so this is some house cleaning, and it's a conservation easement on about 11.5 acres.
Right, but it sort of made me wonder that if he referenced someone who hasn't worked for us for some time, whether the information about the insurance was also correct.
Well, I can certainly confirm it with him. I mean, I have no reason to think that it's incorrect, but I'll confirm that.
Are there any other questions on this? Ms. Baker, did you want to make a comment, or?
Yes, I just wanted to say on behalf of Friends of Princeton Open Space that we're happy to see this dedication of a conservation easement coming to fruition. It's about 11.5 acres. And I wanted to point out that this was one of those rare instances where something like this kind of got dropped. I'm not clear how, but as you say, it goes way back. But thanks to Bob Kaiser's institutional memory about it, and also the fact that Chris Tarr and the folks at Goldman Sachs were good about carrying through on the commitment that was made, it's now being finalized. So I just think they deserve recognition for making sure that it finally got done. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. And the other person who deserves recognition is Wendy, who would call and remind me that this needed to go on our agenda many times, so thank you.
Thank you.
So this was moved and seconded, and Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
And Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, terrific. That passed unanimously, and the public hearing for this ordinance will also be on January 26, 2015. And the final ordinance for this evening is an ordinance creating a no stopping or standing zone on a portion of Little Brook Road north of Magnolia Lane and amending the code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And this is a spot near the front of Little Brook School, and is a safety measure that's being recommended by the police department and traffic and transportation. I don't know if there's any.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Butler.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Liverman. And if there's no questions or comments, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
I have a comment.
Oh, sorry.
I have a
Mr.
comment.
Liverman.
I went to Little Brook School, and it's a beautiful school, and thank you.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, the introduction of that ordinance also passes unanimously, and the public hearing, again, will be on January 26, 2015. And now we will go back to presentations and hear our second presentation this evening from Ms. Stockton on the proposal for Prospect Avenue.
All right. So again, Prospect Avenue is the second of 3 capital projects that the engineering department undertook the design in 2014. For Prospect Avenue, we're looking at the section from Harrison Street to Riverside. It does have a lower traffic volume as indicated by some of our commenters. In the previous section, we've got about 2,000 vehicles per day that use this roadway. It is, though, classified as a minor collector in our master plan. The Princeton Pedestrian and Bike Advisory Committee has a master plan that is in process. It is not formalized as part of the master plan document for the community, but it does indicate that Prospect Avenue is a key connection, and they are looking to establish Prospect Avenue as a bike boulevard. So I've provided a lot of this information. Prospect Avenue is a 30-foot wide roadway. It has sidewalk on both sides. It's currently curbed, and there is an existing traffic island on both legs of the Prospect Avenue Cedar Lane intersection. When we first proposed improvements to Prospect Avenue, the proposal was to remove the islands and only do curb extensions and neck downs on the roadway. This was part of what was presented at the neighborhood meeting in June and put up on the website. After subsequent conversations and a petition from the neighborhood, we hosted Roger Klein from the neighborhood at a traffic and transportation subcommittee to review the design, and it was decided that we would keep the existing islands in place. We would continue with the neck downs on the roadway, so what we would be doing is taking a 30-foot wide roadway and narrowing it to 24 foot at intersections and at a mid-block neck down between Harrison Street and Cedar Lane. As a definition for you, a bike boulevard concept prioritizes bikes over vehicles. It looks to establish a slower speed roadway that is safer for bicyclists. It will include sharrows because the whole idea of a bike boulevard is that the bicyclist is the priority user and they can take the full lane. And so that would be part of the signage that is included in this project, that the bicyclist may use the full lane. So what I've done is given you just little details of each of the sections of roadway here as well, so you can see with the installation of striping, the sharrows, that there's quite a lot of markings within the roadway. One other feature of a bike boulevard is distinctive signage. A lot of communities that have put this in place out west and in Colorado have incorporated colorful signs that say Bike Boulevard. And that can be a step in this process that we can work together with the communities and interested parties to establish some sort of signage. But we do have the standard MUTCD approved signage about bikes taking full lane in this corridor. One other component of the design would be to tighten the radius at Prospect Avenue and Riverside Drive. We have Riverside Elementary located on the corner of the intersection, and it's got quite a wide radius. It's about a 90-foot wide radius. It creates quite a crossing distance for pedestrians that are coming along Prospect to go to Riverside Elementary. And this had been brought up to the Traffic and Transportation Committee as to a problem that needed a solution. And so we have come up with the design to tighten the radius. If you look on this page, there are a couple of dashed lines where the red curb meets the blue curb on Prospect Avenue. That's where the stop bar is currently. And so by putting this design in place, we can actually move the stop bar up so that it's at its realistic location at the intersection. Currently, cars kind of drive slowly through that point and then stop when they have the view along Riverside Drive. So, so that really, in a nutshell, it's about a 2,000-foot long roadway. It's a resurfacing project for the most part, but we will be repairing sidewalks where there's tripping hazards. We will be addressing all of the curb ramps to make sure they're ADA accessible with the appropriate detectable warnings. And then we've added on this layer of the bike boulevard, which would then include the neck downs for the traffic calming, the appropriate striping for sharrows, and some signage. So,
I know there was some question about, especially one of the islands had vegetation that was really tall and that was maybe causing a site disturbance. And have there been conversations with the neighbors about that, or what's the latest with the plantings for the islands?
Right. The plantings on the islands were left that we would work with the residents and the municipal arborists to make sure that the landscaping that is within the islands is appropriate to create a safe visual area within the roadway so that we don't have obstructions or any other safety issues. I think the concern was less about the trees and more about any lower shrubbery and growth. So we will be working with the arborist and the neighborhood. As part of our projects, we always have a planting plan after a roadway is completed, and so this would then follow with that part of it. And one other slide I didn't show you is just the on-street parking. Currently, on-street parking is allowed on Prospect Avenue, and we would retain that. There will be some areas where we have to minimize the parking because of the neck downs. We don't want to have constricted roadway with on-street parking in the same locations, but as you can see from the green areas showed on the plans, there appears to be quite sufficient areas within each block for the on-street parking.
Is the only loss of on-street parking that one neck down in between Harrison and Cedar?
Actually, the way the ordinance is written now, the restricted area of parking is only within 100 feet of Harrison Street. So by Title 39, you do have the intersection, no parking areas, so we will have more loss of parking than exists now.
I see. So the neck down approaching Riverside School from out of town is another, that sort of extended island, is that another place where we're losing it? I'm just trying to, it looks to me like it's pretty comparable to what they've got now, for the most part. Is that a fair judgment?
I think that's a fair judgment. The only real area that you're losing the parking is at the neck down, the mid-block neck down, in front of 218 and 219. Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Howard?
Thanks, Deanna. So I travel this route every day until my son thankfully graduated from Riverside, and we've moved on and have new routes. But and one thing that was clear to me is that a lot of people bike on Prospect because it's people going to schools. It's a lot of kids, and I think about you, Stephanie, with trepidation. Let Nate in 5th grade go down Prospect, and sometimes I followed him at a safe distance when he didn't think I was following to make sure he was okay. But one thing that came up, and if you can't answer this, maybe Sergeant Murray can, is I thought there was a discussion about putting in a traffic light at Prospect and Riverside. Wasn't that for a while discussed? And was that dismissed as an idea? And
If I could comment on that.
we have the best crossing guard ever there, Russell, so I'm not trying to put him out of a job, but I thought, and that intersection obviously got a lot of attention with that horrible accident in front of Riverside. So I thought that had been under discussion, and I wondered just what had changed.
Sure. If I could comment, I'm not aware of any discussion of a traffic signal at that location, and I know it's not included in our master plan. Perhaps Sergeant Murray may want to comment as well.
I don't remember that ever being in any type of formal meeting, and perhaps I can answer it this way. For some reason, and I think it has a lot to do with perception and the way that the current intersection is configured, which Deanna showed you up earlier, that intersection has a reputation for having what some people would call a tremendous accident history. And the reality of it is that is just not the case. I've had a total of 4 accidents at that intersection since 2005. Unfortunately, with the incident that happened a little over a year ago on Riverside, which did not take place in the intersection, sort of brought some of those concerns back to light. Right now, the way it is, it would not meet the warrants for a traffic signal. And with the improvements that we have slated, the 2 accidents of the 4 that I have on record, it probably, if anything, would serve to eliminate that type. 2 of the accidents are accidents with people that are on Prospect, that are heading, if we call Prospect, we'll call it east-west, if they're heading in a west direction. Mm-hmm. They come up, that stop bar is set far back. Mm-hmm. They don't know whether to stop there or proceed beyond it, and then it creates a little bit of confusion, and just enough confusion as to whether the person really is thrown off and misgauges how fast a north-south car is traveling. And that seems to be the common denominator with the 2 accidents I've had, that situation. Both of the cars that had the right-of-way were coming in a southbound fashion in front of Riverside School. The person thought they had ample time to make it across the intersection, and there was a collision. The improvements that we have proposed would once again bring that stop bar up, bring a person under control, and give them a much better view of the traffic in an east or north-southbound fashion on Riverside. And the other thing that, the big improvement that it would do, as would all the other intersections along this stretch of Prospect, is by tightening up those cross streets, we would limit the amount of time that any pedestrian would have to be in the roadway. So really, besides the motor vehicle aspect of it, especially at the intersection where you refer to our best crossing guard, I would not argue with you. And for the record, he'd never be out of a job as long as I'm traffic officer here. But they would have probably about a third less exposure time.
Okay. Well, this is great. I'm too old to have any more kids, but if I did, I would want them to go to Riverside and want them to. This sounds really exciting. Have you talked to the school and coordinated with them, with Bill Cirillo and?
Unfortunately, Bill's, I think, been out on medical leave, but we have worked with Marilyn in Transportation Services and Gary in Facilities.
Great. Thank you.
Bill is back. He is back. Yes.
Mr. Moore?
The concept of a bike boulevard is a very interesting one. 2,000 feet is a good start. Are you thinking about extending it east and west of the 2,000 feet?
That is in the plan for the bike, pedestrian and bike advisory committee. They have it connecting actually all the way up and through Nassau Street. I was going to say, I see Sam getting up. He may be able to speak to that better than I can.
Yes, sure, you're welcome.
Yeah, I mean, the bicycle boulevard concept is something quite innovative for this area, and it's something which hasn't been tried a lot around here. And while we were specifically asked to look at this particular section of Prospect Avenue, the bike boulevard concept is something which the Pedestrian Bicycling Advisory Committee have been committed to for quite some time, notably because it offers an opportunity to allow a safer facility for cyclists while minimizing the amount of on-street parking that you're taking away. So it's something that we're very interested to see how well it works. It's worth pointing out that although I congratulate the engineers for putting together this plan and for working with the neighbours to improve it, the types of horizontal deflection traffic calming devices that we're using in this particular design are not universally popular among cyclists, in particular because they act to constrain the roadway, which means that there's a potential pinch point where cyclists and vehicles could be in conflict. So whenever we talk to cyclists about the types of facility that they want to see, a lot of them specifically say we don't want that kind of traffic calming device which forces us into a pinch point with other cars. We've worked with the engineers as best we can to try to explore the different range of horizontal deflection traffic calming devices which are available and which are suitable for this particular street. And what we've come up with, I think, is the best that we can do. Obviously, we can't use vertical deflection traffic calming, i.e. speed bumps, because Council has passed an ordinance to prescribe their further use in Princeton. That limits the amount of flexibility that we have and what we can work with. But I think what we have here is the best that we can do. And what we need to do really is to see how well this works, and if it's popular and if it's seen to be something which encourages people to cycle in the street instead of on the sidewalk, then it's something that we would look to roll out into other locations in Princeton, including further along Prospect Avenue. And with that in mind, we would hope to develop and formalize this master plan, which would specify the particular streets that would be suitable for a bicycle boulevard treatment, and which streets might have other kinds of designs for cyclists. So basically, we have no plans to extend it right now, but as part of the master plan, it's certainly something that we're exploring.
Thank you.
Are there any further comments on this one? I don't think we have a motion yet, so is there a
motion to accept, what are we accepting the report, or?
Oh, yeah, I guess we don't have to.
It's just a report.
I'm sorry. We don't have to have a motion on this one. Thank you for that. And thank you for the work. I know this went through a lot of iterations and working with the neighbors and trying to figure out something that was going to work for everybody, so thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment at what Sam was saying. We did look at chicanes, which could provide a different method of traffic calming, but we've also been working with DPW, Public Works, and emergency services in the traffic calming library toolbox to try to figure out what suits all of the needs. And with anything with complete streets, it's context-based, and it's got to be a compromise. So
I do actually have one question. Is there upcoming work on Cedar? And the reason I ask is because we have had requests for traffic calming along Cedar as well.
A lot of requests, yeah, definitely.
Cedar Lane is not on the current 5-year master plan, capital improvement program. That was one part of the neighborhood's discussion, was about the installation of a 4-way stop at Cedar Lane and Prospect. And when Mr. Klein came to the Traffic and Transportation Committee meeting, Sergeant Murray did go through the traffic history, and we also looked at criteria for the 4-way stops, and that intersection does not meet the criteria for those.
Well, actually, okay, so I am actually going to ask the question, what are the criteria there, if you could sort of walk us through at a summary level?
You would have to have an established accident history there.
So, in other words, it is not appropriate to use a stop as a traffic calming, the stop sign itself as a traffic calming device?
It's not encouraged, no. As they're measured to control speed, mid-block crosswalks and stop signs are not designed to do that.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that runs counterintuitive to, I think, certainly, I'll just say my own expectation.
But actually, I mean, just to pick up on that thread, I think Patrick and I are probably thinking about the same person. We hear a lot about speeding on Cedar, and Sergeant Murray, I mean, any
Yeah, we entertain...
I know you've been interested in doing more enforcement, but any hope there?
We were receiving regular concerns about speeding on Cedar, and we chipped away at that with increased enforcement, this deployment of the speed trailer. I have not heard any further requests as of late, but if it's starting to creep back, we will make sure that we pick up enforcement.
No, I definitely hear them, and I hear from people who put out, like, what are those, like, fake pictures of kids to try and get people to slow down, and, you know that it's that, because people are trying to avoid Nassau, well, I mean, you don't need me to tell you, but people are trying to avoid Nassau and Harrison and going around by Cedar. So, I still do hear that.
Okay. We will rotate them back through then. Just reviewing my notes, we have 3 accidents on record there since 2010 at Prospect and Cedar. And one was due to a driver running the stop sign on Cedar at Prospect. Actually, only 2, I'm sorry. So 2 since 2010 at that intersection. Another warrant for 4-way stop is that it eventually be scheduled for a traffic signal installation. So that's just 2 of many. Okay. I just want to add that what Mr. Bunting had to say is true about the choke points, but I also feel that, in all fairness to everyone, when we came up with this plan, another part of the concerns for that stretch of Prospect Avenue was the speeding. So we sort of weighed all of their options, and even though that does force a bicyclist into the choke point, when balancing the speeding concerns and the offset that hopefully we will see in a reduction, it manifests itself in a reduction in the speed because of the choke points. Hopefully everybody that will be traveling on that road will be in much more better control of their vehicle, be traveling at a lower speed.
Thank you. So thank you, Sergeant Murray, and thank you, Deanna, for the work on this. And I also want to thank Sam Bunting and Steve Cruz and all the volunteers who helped with reaching out to the neighbors and putting this together. This is a good night for complete streets, so thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to resolutions, and I'd recommend we take a few of these in bulk, 15-21, 15-23, and 15-24, unless anyone objects. Is there a motion to introduce those three in bulk?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, those 3 passed unanimously, and I figured there might be some questions on 15-25, which is the bid award for the trash contract to Central Jersey. I see Mr. Huff. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I know Public Works has been working on this.
Yeah, just to report very briefly, Public Works discussed it today. The bid is in order. This is the lowest bid, and I forget the technical legal term, but it's a valid bid.
It's higher than what we're paying now, but
it's significantly
we knew we were
higher.
going into this.
What is it going to be, about $115,000 a year more? Is that right? Something like that? Yeah.
It probably reflects the...
It's basically, the original bids a few years ago, if you look at them, they were the same total dollar amount. What they're telling us is this is what they want to pick up garbage in town, in the town. And they got the per ton cost wrong the last time in terms of the estimate for the tonnage. Frankly, it was, we talked about whose fault it was, and we believe it was more their fault, but it's irrelevant. We're here where we are now, and the bid is a little bit above the monthly average or the annual average. The monthly tonnage in the bid works out, or in the request for bids, worked out to 450 tons per month, 5,400 tons per year, and the average over, I think, the last 12 months is 420. So there's a little bit of margin built in there, even in that bid in our budget.
I make a motion that we accept the bid.
Second.
It's moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Mr. Simon. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. And finally, 15-26 Westerly Road Culvert, Mercer County acceptance to take jurisdiction and assign a Mercer County number to the structure. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
It's moved by Ms. Crummiller and seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That resolution passes unanimously as well. And now we come to the consent agenda. Oh. Well, if I would have seen you raise your hand, but, I mean, we voted already, but if you want to add your 2 cents, you're welcome to, or just try to be quick, yeah.
Hi, Stephanie. So as far as the waste contract, just in light of the fact that it's getting more and more expensive, this is the opportunity to try and pull more things from the waste stream. So I know one of the reasons for saying we were going to renew for 2 years was so that we were getting a low deal, lower than we might get otherwise in other circumstances or in other towns. So it could be more cost effective to pull more things out that get put into compost, like leaf and brush and food waste, so that there's less cost at the tipping fees if we move in that direction. So I guess we have now 2 years to figure out a better.
Well, actually, just to confirm, Mr. Hoff, this is still a per ton bid, right? So the more we pull out, the more we save. That was the previous contract, and that is the current contract as well.
Okay.
So,
although if what we pull out if the tipping fee is half of what it is, it would seem like it would be still less expensive.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
The tipping fee stays the same. This is just the cost for the hauling. So the hauling is going to be more expensive. We're going to be paying more per ton for our trash. So it does make the compost more attractive because we're saving more given, for every ton we pull out, we're saving more given that ton costs more to throw out.
But none of the tipping fees are included in this.
Correct.
No, that's correct. This is the hauling
separate.
portion only. The tipping fees are, what, about double this?
I think your overall point stands, though, where we do better if we throw out less, especially things that aren't trash.
Right, but nothing that we've done changes that. So if we, for example, are somehow able to eliminate 25% of our current waste stream, we will save in the municipal budget 25%.
Okay. Great. Well, we'll hope the 1,000 families composting are putting as much as they can in those bins.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, now we come to our consent agenda, which contain items of a routine nature that are voted on by a single vote. And does anybody want anything removed from the consent agenda, or is there a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Second.
I have a question.
Okay.
What day of the week is May 4th?
Do you know the answer to that?
I don't.
May 4th is a Monday.
Monday? Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. It's been moved by Mr. Simon and seconded by Ms. Butler. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda passes. And now is there a motion to move into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Butler, seconded by Mr. Simon. All in favor?
Aye.
Let's try that again. All in favor of moving to closed session? Any opposed?
I'm sorry.
Be it resolved